it's not always like the doctors personally benefit from continuing to read studies when they get home after a long day of work, you
I
know? I
know.
mean, we would like to think that the doctors are, eat, sleep, and breathe, taking care of other people's health. But I mean, but to be honest, like,
They're human. For anyone who's ever searched for a primary care doctor, you know that it's very, very hard to find a doctor in this day and age that's really going to spend time with you, that's going to, look at your health individually. And when I realized that that didn't exist, I was like, what?
there's a problem here. There's a lack of communication between providers. There's a lack of care after you get rid of cancer. It's like probably feels almost like getting out of jail. It's like I could imagine like an inmate, been like part of this like system and this this ecosystem, and then boom, it's just like free. It's like, okay, now, like, where is the infrastructure for me now?
There's a reason that you hate insurance. It's because they reward doctors for volume. So the more patients they see in a day, the more money they make. That's what the fee-for-service model represents. Like, the more services you offer, the more patients you see, the more codes you bill for, the more money you make. And so doctors, first of all, they don't get paid very much to begin with in primary care. They have to be subject to these incentives. They are trying to squeeze as many patients as they can in a day because that's ultimately how they derive revenue.
Welcome to Built for Growth. I am excited to have you here with me today because my guest, Chloe Harrouche, and I get into the nitty-gritty of what is wrong with the healthcare system and how Chloe's breast cancer diagnosis at just 23 years old led her into starting a company known as Lanby, which is a first ever patient-led concierge practice, and a company that prides itself on enabling men and women to optimize their health in a holistic and comprehensive way. I personally think this kind of reform is brilliant, and as a whole, we probably need a lot more options like this. I know that I personally have opted out of medical insurance, the entire model, because not only do I believe in the long run that I'll save more money, but I choose to prioritize my health, and every month that I would have paid insurance, I set that money aside in case of an emergency. I know it's a gamble. I also use it to pay out-of-pocket expenses, like going to see functional medical practitioners of my choosing. I am really excited, though, about this episode and to share it with you. So, as always, thank you for listening. Chloe, I've been really excited to have you on this podcast because I think that what you're doing is so important in the world. And I personally don't subscribe to the medical insurance model. So when I heard that you were providing a service that is for my people, I was like, this is amazing. But before we jump into all of that, let's start with the why. How did you even get to where you are? I know you had kind of a stream of unfortunate events. 23 years old, diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So a little bit about me. Yeah, so I've always been in healthcare. I've always been obsessed with medicine. Biology was like the thing that I nerded out on. After college, I was a bioengineer. I went into healthcare consulting. Like healthcare was very familiar to me. But when I was 23, diagnosed with breast cancer completely out of nowhere, I started to see healthcare a bit differently, right? Like for the first time, I was in the patient seat. And at first, that felt kind of cool. Like I was like, what does this feel like? What is chemotherapy going to be like? What is surgery going to feel like? And it was almost like an experiment. And then reality started to settle in once I was graduating from treatment and I started to take, my life a lot more seriously. I started to go back to my doctor and ask questions about, okay, now what, right? Like they had such a prescriptive plan when it came to my treatment that I almost assumed that there would be the same approach to the rest of my life. For anyone who's been a patient of a disease like cancer where there is a standard of care, you feel almost protected by that standard of care. And so when I went back to my doctors and asked, okay, now what? And they didn't have an answer for me, I was completely at a loss. I felt alone. I felt confused. I was someone who wanted to take back control over my health. I wanted to feel empowered. I wanted to understand where wellness fit into the landscape of my future. And the fact that my doctors couldn't answer those questions was very frustrating to me. And so that's when I realized that I needed more of a quarterback, someone who could, look at my health history, understand that I have, a more nuanced history than your average 23-year-old, but could also factor in the fact that I wanted to be living a very long, healthy, vibrant life. I wanted to, do all of the things. And so I went looking for that within primary care. And again, for anyone who's ever searched for a primary care doctor, you know that it's very, very hard to find a doctor in this day and age that's really going to spend time with you, that's going to, look at your health individually, and who's going to also factor in like some of the more cutting edge technologies, diagnostics, wellness habits that are so integral today to prevention. And when I realized that that didn't exist, I was like, what? Like, how? Like, how is it that I'm the only one asking for this type of service? And I would asking around my peers, like, who do you go to for primary care? Are you satisfied? Is this enough for you? And I quickly realized that I was not alone. Like, this was clearly a problem. So many people around me, cancer diagnosis or not, were eager to feel empowered about their health, and be more proactive. And so that's sort of how I, decided to embark on this journey of like rethinking primary care.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with so many aspects of what you just said. And I want to highlight because I think we share a similar belief in that this isn't really the doctor's fault. So,
Right.
I've had experience, of course, going to a primary doctor. I think most people have had that experience, and it's like the nurse comes in, she does it, takes the vitals or whatever things that, they kind of initiate you with.
Yeah.
And then you see the doctor for like a blip in the whole appointment. And it's very quick and it's very much like, okay, how can I get you what you need to get you out of here? And it's like they seem stressed and rushed a lot of times. Um,
No, they are.
why?
Why are
Why?
they stressed? So
Yeah.
this goes back to the insurance piece. Like, there's a reason that you hate insurance. It's because it doesn't align with your values. And the reason it doesn't is because they reward doctors for volume. So the more patients they see in a day, the more money they make. That's what the fee for service model represents. Like, the more services you offer, the more patients you see, the more codes you bill for, the more money you make. And so doctors, first of all, they don't get paid very much to begin with in primary care. And so they have to be subject to these incentives. They are trying to squeeze as many patients as they can in a day because that's ultimately how they derive revenue. The patient in that equation is not the customer. The insurer is. And that is where healthcare breaks. Because if the patient is not the customer, then the physician is not thinking about the patient customer relationship as really that meaningful to them in terms of like improving their financial growth goals. Um, and so that's ultimately where there's a disconnect. And so when we thought about building this model from the ground up and working from first principles, we realized that insurance could not be part of the equation, because if we wanted to properly incentivize physicians to care, and it's not that they don't care, but it's that the incentives are working against them. But if we wanted to really align their sort of true altruistic reason for being a doctor with the financial incentives, then we needed to have more of a subscription flat fee model.
Okay. So tell me what it was like, getting diagnosed at 23 and your experience going through the whole process. I mean, did you feel like the comprehensive understanding of where you were with your diagnosis was, I don't know how many different doctors that you had to see. What was that experience like? Because I think it's great. I want to talk about everything that happens after and everything that you're doing, but I really want to paint a picture of your journey and what led you to want to do something different.
Yeah, such a good question. So when I was diagnosed, I had the most incredible team around me. I had a surgeon who was the best surgeon. I had an amazing oncologist. I had a radiation oncologist. I had to go through IVF because I wanted to preserve my fertility, and avoid sort of the impact of chemotherapy. So I had a great reproductive endocrinologist. I had the best specialists. And I felt very supported in their care. I felt like I was in the best hands. And so, because I knew that they were the best, I did not question them at all. And that was like the first weird thing in my journey. Like, I think because we as patients know how limited doctors are with their time, we feel like whatever time we can get is like a gift. And so I wanted to be their favorite patient. I wanted them to feel like, oh, great. It's so good to see Chloe. We can actually like spend a little bit more time with her because we enjoy it. Like I wanted them to enjoy me. And so therefore they would maybe spend a little bit more time than they otherwise would if they didn't like the patient. So whenever they would tell me, okay, what do you want to do? This is what I recommend. I'd be like, great, I'll do what you recommend. And by the way, I'm going to make sure that my outcomes and my recovery and my symptoms are as good as they can possibly be so that again, you feel like I'm your best patient. And so I guess this was maybe my competitive nature or, just the fact that I understood healthcare really well. But that's sort of what drove my experience is like this desire to please. And it wasn't until I was done with treatment where I started to think about all the things that, would go into my life going forward. Like, should I eat differently? Should I exercise more? Should I take supplements? Like, I didn't know anything about wellness, which is funny, again, going back to like how exposed I was to healthcare. The fact that wellness was not at all part of the equation for me was quite interesting. Like, I was not a wellnessy person. And so, that's when I would go to my doctors and be like, so what do you think about intermittent fasting? I heard it really helps with chemotherapy, the impact of cellular repair and turnover and cleaning out the toxins. And they were like, what? I was like, wait, you guys don't know about intermittent fasting? Hold on. Like something's missing here. Like I'm hearing about intermittent fasting as being like the next hottest thing with cancer treatment. And you're telling me that you guys don't know anything about it. And so that's when I started to unravel like, okay, where do I draw the line between what my doctors are capable of and where I have to go elsewhere to search for answers. So that's when I started to feel like, okay, maybe my doctors shouldn't be on the pedestal the way that I had put them. And I think it goes back to like compartmentalizing. Like doctors aren't necessarily the best at everything. Like you have to recognize that they are specialists for a reason. They specialize in that one thing.
I think that's a great point, and you really want to drive that home because as much as I respect and appreciate someone with a medical degree, I think we, myself included, and it seems like you share this, and a lot of people that I've spoken to really see doctors as so superior in every way. And I think it's really important that we should definitely respect what they went to school for and their knowledge and everything, but that the scope might not be as broad as we just assume that it is. And that it is okay to question that and beyond that and look beyond that and listen a little bit to your intuition because some doctors who are not well versed aren't as ethical to say like,
I don't
I
know.
actually don't know that. Yeah,
Right.
some doctors don't like to say that. And so they just say, oh, that's, don't do that. Or, do this and only do this. And you listen to me. And that's, what I say is king. And so many people are under this, like, some doctors are on a power trip and some people fall victim to that because they're like, I shouldn't question the doctor. doctor knows best. Well, within the scope, and I think it's always, again, good to lean on your intuition and just look beyond and ask questions. And if you don't feel like the answer that you're getting is really answering your question, then I think it is okay to go beyond that. I'll use another friend of mine, for example. She just turned 40, and she's like, went to her doctor and was like, hey, I know that I'm not perimenopausal yet, but I kind of just want to know, what should I start like doing to prepare for that? Is there anything that I should know? And the doctor was like, no, you have no symptoms, right? So come back to me when you have
Terrible.
symptoms. And it just goes along with that again. It's like, no, you come to me when you have a problem. I'm not
Exactly.
here to like prevent something. I am here to fix the problem once it's there. And I say fix loosely because a lot of times a version of fix is sometimes as simple to them as silencing communication that the body is trying to give you and say, hey, something's wrong here. We don't necessarily want to break that line of communication and then assume that everything is okay. Kind of sometimes nice to take a deep dive and say, okay, what's actually causing this? Okay, so I digress. Let's go back to you mentioned preserving your fertility and coming out on the other side of this. You think you had you took some eggs out to have them frozen. Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think you've mentioned that, but I have heard you talk before. So could we go a little bit into that and continue on with your journey?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, chemotherapy may or may not affect the quality of your eggs. And so we were trying to be proactive in doing an egg retrieval before I started chemotherapy. I think IVF was also like fairly new at that point. Like there wasn't as much confidence and protocols as there is today. I ended up being overstimulated. So I had an egg retrieval done where they retrieved 43 eggs. And at the time, they were like, this is amazing. Like have again exceeded expectations. Normally in an egg retrieval, you maybe a good outcome is like 18 eggs. 43 eggs. I was like, great, I can create an army with this reserve.
Yeah.
And so I was like super confident in that and ended up being overstimulated, but like didn't think that that was a bad thing because if that meant that I got 43 eggs, like I'll suffer through the pain, right? But like I was super tender, super swollen. It was very painful recovery, which it is not meant to be. Like egg retrievals are not meant to be that painful. You bloat a little bit, but I mean, I ended up having to go to the emergency room. I was in so much pain and I didn't know why. Anyway, though, fast forward, 5 years later, my husband and I were ready to, entertain the conversation of having kids. I was still on tamoxifen, which is a drug that breast cancer survivors are meant to stay on for 10 years. So I knew that I couldn't carry. So I ended up using surrogates.
Hold on a second. What is tamoxifen?
So tamoxifen is a drug that basically binds to estrogen receptors. It looks like an estrogen, so it binds to estrogen receptors and it therefore blocks those estrogen receptors from absorbing real estrogen. And so because my tumor was estrogen receptor positive, if you block those estrogen receptors on the tumor cells, then it prevents it from growing. So
Okay.
tamoxifen is like a preventive drug that you give to women with estrogen receptor positive tumors.
Okay. Interesting. Do you know if that still like a protocol?
Yeah,
Is it something that you like if you had, a friend had breast cancer, like they would do it
yeah.
and okay.
They're they're now reevaluating whether you need to do it for 10 years when you are someone who is, of childbearing age. So when I was having this conversation with my doctor, my oncologist, he was like, let's try to do 10 years. But if at 5 years you want to take a break because you want to try to conceive naturally, we can do that. So, anyway, this was sort of before that 5 year period that I was ready to start having a family. And so we were going to entertain surrogates. We decided to take those eggs, fertilize them into embryos. And in that process, I tried to do that with half of my eggs. All of them died. They didn't make it past the fertilization stage. And so I was like, what? Like, what's wrong with these eggs? Like, Okay, so I went through the next batch, tried to fertilize them all, and only one survived. So at that point, I was like, wait, I can't put this one embryo that I have into a surrogate. Like, I, at that point, was incredibly wellness obsessed. Like, I was doing all of the things. I felt like my body was a temple. And so I said to myself, you know what? I would rather wait until I'm done with tamoxifen. I can carry this baby because if anyone has a good chance of having a baby, it's me because of how much I'm taking care of myself. Lo and behold, I ended up losing my period, and we can sort of backtrack to what I was doing that ended up causing me to lose my period. But
At
when
what
I went,
point did you lose your period? So you're 23. I'm so sorry. So you're
no,
23,
no,
you're
it's okay. I'm going
diagnosed.
all over the place.
No, you're good. You're 23, diagnosed. When are you cancer free? And then from what point from there did you lose your cycle?
Okay, so I was done with treatment at 24. So it
Okay.
basically took about a year for me to be done with treatment. And that's when I started to learn about wellness. So I was listening to podcasts. I heard about intermittent fasting. Was reading about how carbs and sugar and, processed all these things, alcohol, terrible for you, cut all of that out. Again, to the point about being a perfect patient, like if someone tells me that this is going to be good for me, it's very easy for me to implement it. I'm very disciplined. So I did all the things. I was intermittent fasting, exercising every day, cleanest diet you can imagine. And I became probably just underweight. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was underweight and I lost my period about 4 years later. So 4 years after being done with
So
cancer treatment, in those 4 years, gradually became more and more wellness obsessed and lost my period out of the blue. Like it just went away. And I went to my oncologist and I was like, do you think that this is from chemo? Or do you think that maybe I'm underweight? Because my family was telling me, oh, it's just because you're underweight. You need to gain weight. And I was like, no, I eat such a clean diet. I'm so healthy. How could this be a bad thing? Like, if anything, I feel like this is a good thing that I don't, how am I supposed to gain weight? Like, anyway, so my oncologist said, I don't know. Like we don't know. There's not enough data with young women with breast cancer. You are one of the very few people who had chemotherapy at the age of, 23. So there's not enough data to show that chemotherapy is going to cause, early onset of menopause. And so I said, okay, well, then I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Like, this feels good. This feels healthy. I want to keep doing what I'm doing because no doctor was telling me not to. And so, at that point, I was still on tamoxifen. But then after the 5 years passed, so a year later, that's when we decided for me to do another round of an egg retrieval because I only had one embryo left. And so, met with an IVF doctor who said to me, it doesn't matter that you don't have a period. We'll put you on hormones. We'll give you a fake cycle and we will do an egg retrieval. We will have a successful egg retrieval. He was right in that I was able to do two successful egg retrievals. So I got another batch of embryos. But then when it came to implanting those embryos, I kept on miscarrying. I was like, why? Why is this happening? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, really?
Mm.
Like, there's no root cause? Like, so anyway, I ended up saying, like, I am emotionally burnt out from this. I
Yeah.
need to pause. I need to reevaluate my health. I need to go to a doctor that's actually going to look deeper and figure out the connection between my chemo and my current lifestyle and, all the things. So I explored functional medicine for the first time. And it was at the time that I was building the Lanby. So for me, it was like, okay, like let me see where there's real truth to this functional medicine thing. And so I met with a functional medicine doctor, did all of these labs, and she said, like, okay, I can clearly see here that you're deficient in your thyroid, you're deficient in all of your reproductive hormones. Basically your body is in a complete state of stress. Your body has shut down. And I was like,
And
what
you're
does that
probably like,
mean?
why? Because I mean, you're probably not super. I mean, you probably weren't super stressed prior to, the failed attempts of like, pregnancy. You're probably like, yeah, I'm feeling good, and I'm sure that it added stress once you had, the mishaps with all of that. But Did that come as a surprise to you? Where you're like, gosh, I'm not like that stressed. Seems
A
crazy.
100%. 100%. Well, so the thing is that stress can be a number of different things. It can
Hmm.
be emotional stress, it can be physical stress. And so I think it ended up
Nutritional
being
stress too.
nutritional stress too. Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I think that it was the combination of I was working out too hard. And like when I say too hard, I mean, I'm not doing insanely long runs or anything like that, but I do think that for what I was eating and how often and consistent I was exercising, there was a mismatch. Um, and I think also there was like a psychological stress. Like when you, even though I was feeling so good about the foods that I was eating and felt like I was never starving myself, I was always feeding myself healthy, good things. I was never in like trying to actually restrict what I was eating, but I was so obsessed with what I was eating that I think that in and of itself manifested as stress, right? Like that need
Mm.
for control, like, oh, I need to work out today. If I don't, I'm going to be stressed, or I need to make sure that I'm eating healthy. If I go to a restaurant and there isn't something healthy on the menu, I'm going to be stressed. You know what I mean? It's like those types of things that I think contribute to this overall state of stress. And your body's just like, hold on, like, I need to just survive here because you're not giving me enough. Like, you're not relaxed. And
Yeah.
by the way, like, I think that uncovering all of that is so hard. It is like, it's like I'm very mindful of all of it, but it's not like it was easy to then realize, oh, okay, let me just like stop doing all of that.
Yeah. No, you know what? I recently learned about how women should diet differently. Myself being a professional athlete, I've done most things according to male model. It's most of the studies are done on males, and that's just what I had around me. And it was just like, well, you just do it how they do it. But twice in my career, I've experienced amenorrhea, stopping of my cycle. And granted, both times it was relatively brief. The impact of that was still long. It still took a really long time because as women, we're in a 28-day hormone cycle. So for us to reset our hormones each time takes 28 days potentially. So we only have 12 opportunities to get it fixed or right in a year. I mean, think about that for a second, right? 12 ovulations in a year. And like, if it's not correct, it just takes a while for the body to find that homeostasis. But what happens is that the endocrine system needs a lot of energy. Like our hormonal system needs a lot of calories. And even if we're in a slight deficit regularly to where our metabolism's having to start to suppress itself in order to preserve our life, the body says, well, we're not eating enough calories to support an extra life within us. Our hormones are not going to align with that. We are going to make this adjustment and we are going to start shutting down the function of the endocrine system so that we can prioritize just living life and the calorie expenditures that our body is required to do every day. Now, our body obviously doesn't know whether we're having to run around for, safety in the wild, and that's just what we do on a regular, or we're working out and we're just, whatever reason, we're not getting enough. And it doesn't always have to feel like starving yourself. It doesn't. It doesn't mean that you're hungry. It can literally be like sometimes I'm eating so much whole food that I am very satisfied and content and I'm struggling to get enough calories in a day because the food is so clean and it's so full of nutrients and it's a lot. Like when you eat a whole food meal and you're not adding extra sauces or sugars or anything like that, the meals are very filling. And I remember trying to get 2,000 calories in a day while working out 2 or 3 times a day. So again, sometimes that even suppresses your appetite for some time as your body kind of needs to cool down. And then you're trying to find the time to get the food in. And it's like, oh my gosh, like this is really difficult. And I never really dipped below 1,800 calories. And I still had like an endocrine misfire. I still hit a stage of amenorrhea, and 1,800 calories is a lot. And my nutritionist was like, I wouldn't go lower than that, Miesha. He's like, your endocrine function as a woman needs a certain amount of energy. And it seems for whatever reason that our body puts that on the chopping block. I guess it makes sense, right? If we are exercising beyond our means and we're not supporting our body with enough calories, and this is a problem I think many, many women have, is not eating enough, especially physically fit women, women who work out every single day, because the signs are not always clear. But if you are losing your period and you are someone who works out regularly and you eat clean, just think about it for a second. First of all,
Yeah.
you probably need more protein. And second of all, it's okay. Like you can eat more. Like put some butter on your eggs. Like
More
just I don't know,
fat.
add
Yeah.
more fats, add more of the calorie dense, rich foods that are going to help support not only your requirement for working out, but support your hormonal and endocrine system. Because yes, fertility seems to be on the chopping block when you're
Yeah.
not getting enough of what you need.
Yeah. And same with carbs. Like me, I vilified carbs,
Yeah, and they're
and
not. We need
it's
them.
so dangerous, right? Like, and now it's so hard for me because on the one hand, I'm thinking about the relationship between sugar and cancer. But then on the
Yes.
other, I'm like, there's definitely, the need for carbs when it comes to hormone health. So it's like it's so hard when you're trying to rationalize it all and when you become so obsessed. Like going back to like my why, I wish that I had gone about wellness in a much more methodical way, like in a way that was supervised. I wish my hormones were being watched. I wish that I had guidance from a nutritionist. Like every nutritionist that I met with was giving me guidance that was so outdated that I was like, this is not worth my time, And I feel like we as consumers today or as patients, we're so much more educated and there's so much more information out there that if a provider doesn't feel like they are staying informed of the latest research and the latest technology, then we dismiss them. And to a certain extent, we should, because they should be staying current. But at the same time, like that's where we've sort of lost the integration between healthcare and wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that. And it's not always like the doctors personally benefit from continuing to read studies when they get home after a long day of work, you
I
know? I
know.
mean, we would like to think that the doctors are, eat, sleep, and breathe, taking care of other people's health. But I mean, but to be honest, like
They're human.
they're human, and it's not how they were necessarily taught in the first place. That's always really interesting to me. What doctors are actually taught.
Oh,
Nine,
yeah.
and what they're not. I think it wasn't um, till my doctor told me about it, a medical doctor, he's an anesthesiologist. He's like, yeah, we barely take anything in nutrition, maybe like one course, and then it was Casey Means coming out and talking a ton about the fact that, she graduated top of her class from Stanford and never had, like, there was so much she didn't learn until after the fact. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a problem here. There's a lack of communication between providers. There's a lack of care, but after you get rid of cancer, it's probably feels almost like getting out of jail. It's like I could imagine like an inmate, been like part of this like system and this this ecosystem, and then boom, it's just like free. It's like, okay, now like where is the infrastructure for me now? Like what do I go and do? And like how do I make sure that I'm not repeating the same thing? Like where do I go? So you get cancer free. You're going through this journey with struggling with infertility. Let's finish that thought, but then let's come back to Lanby. You mentioned it earlier. I want people to know about that. But okay, continue on with your journey of like infertility and struggling with that.
Well, so the story basically ends with me pursuing surrogacy. Like that's sort of where I landed because I didn't feel like I had the ability to sort of flip that switch. And I didn't want to wait for my body to sort of get to where it needed to be. I also didn't feel confident in my body and in myself to really like do what I needed to do. And so pursued surrogacy. I now have two healthy kids, thank God, both with surrogates. And in the meantime, I've been sort of slowly but surely trying to work on my adrenal health. And it's funny that you say, this is sort of the aftermath of cancer. I see this with so many different phases of health and disease, whether it's like a woman postpartum where she's given birth and there's so much attention on women while they're pregnant, and then they give birth and people just like assume that they'll be fine. And, it's a
Yes.
whole other, you know, healthcare need when you're postpartum that is completely ignored. And so I think that healthcare in general just really struggles with these transitions. Again, going back to the specialist issue, like when you're in cancer treatment, you have an oncologist who focuses on treatment, or you have a surgeon who focuses on removing the actual tumor. But then there's no one actually helping you with the transition to survivorship. And that should be a primary care doctor. But primary care doctors, to our earlier point, don't have time to connect the dots. Like, you're in for a sick visit, or you're in for your annual physical where they do like very preliminary labs. They're not really looking at much. They're definitely not going to take the time to pick up the phone and call your specialist to see what's going on. They're not going to look at your records. They barely even look at your intake form. So primary care has become irrelevant. And so again, who is sort of overseeing those transitional periods? And again, going back to the postpartum example, you could say the same thing. Like, OBGYNs follow women during their pregnancy. The moment they give birth, they do a 6-week check-in, and that's it. Like, postpartum lasts a year, sometimes more. And so it's wild to see like how primary care can fill those gaps. And that's what I think is so exciting about it, because when done right, you end up really eliminating the need for so many specialists to be involved in your care, because actually 80% of healthcare needs can be addressed by primary care when it's done right.
Okay, talk to me about doing it right. Talk to me about
Yeah.
Lanby.
So we talked a lot about how physicians can't do it all. So I think the biggest thing for us was, how do we deliver what people actually need in order to be proactive about their health? It's not just medicine, it's wellness, right? So people need to learn how to eat right. They need to learn how to exercise in a way that, fits their biomechanics, but also fits their body composition goals. They need personalized supplementation. They need recommendations on sleep. They need to really improve their sleep. Going back to the example of your friend in perimenopause, sleep is like the most important thing to nail down before you go through perimenopause. Because if you do not have a good sleep routine, then your adrenals are
Mm,
already at a disadvantage. So how do we build resilience in your body to be able to fight through those transitionary moments where your hormones are naturally going to, you know, go up and down? So we thought about it from that perspective of, okay, we need medicine. So we have your doctor, family medicine, trained in integrative functional medicine as well, understands what's happening in the longevity space, is constantly seeking opportunities to learn and grow and stay ahead of that curve. And then at the same time, coupling their expertise with that of a registered dietitian. So registered dietitians, for those who don't know, because there's nutritionists out there, there's health coaches, there's um, naturopaths. Registered dietitians go through so many years of clinical training. So they understand from a clinical perspective how to leverage nutrition as a tool when it comes to fighting disease. But they also can sort of work backwards to say, how do we use nutrition to prevent disease? And that's where we love sort of the combination of pairing a physician with a registered dietitian. It becomes a synergy that is so powerful. It's so much more comprehensive. And I think a lot of practices have a dietitian on staff, or they have a health coach on staff, but it's not well integrated. And so for me, anytime I was told, go see a nutritionist, I was like, yeah, but they don't know my whole health history, and they don't know your perspective, and they don't know. So it almost feels like I'm now having to repeat myself a million times. So I really wanted the registered dietitian to be integrated into the entire experience. And then the third leg for us was coordination of care, right? Like, primary care doctors should be able to know what's happened in your past and be able to coordinate all the specialists that you need going forward and really create like a nice bow around it. Like they should be your quarterback in sifting through all of the information that you're getting from these specialists and saying, okay, we have all this information. What do we want to do next? I'm going to help you make sure that we're asking the right questions. I'm going to make sure that we're making the right decision for you. And ultimately, I'm going to track the progress over time and manage your care. And so the member advocate on the team is meant to really support the physician in, curating those referrals and making sure that when we do have patients who have an existing care team, that we also centralize all of that information under our hub. So we basically have this three-pronged approach where we have the medicine, the wellness, and the care coordination. And then in terms of the model, so we have the care team, and we also very much believe in, again, removing insurance out of the equation. So it's a membership. We wanted it to be a flat fee membership because we wanted people to feel like, okay, now that I'm a member, I don't have to think about like, oh, is my doctor going to charge me for going through my lab results? Is my doctor going to charge me for this one question that I have about a prescription? No, I don't want patients to be thinking about that, and I don't want physicians to be thinking about it. So we have a flat fee model where you pay once and all of your care is included within that. And when we define care, it's multi-pronged. We have, obviously your visits. We have a baseline assessment, which is an 80-minute visit. We have a follow-up visit where we go through all your labs. And we also have quarterly visits where we redo your labs and then assess your care plan accordingly. But then we also have acute visits when you get sick and you need to see your doctor. We have well visits for when you want to just have a one-on-one with your wellness advisor about, a new diet you want to try, or you haven't been sleeping really well and you want to get to the bottom of why. So we also have the ability for those types of visits. And then we have an app for people to be able to just ask very simple questions that they don't necessarily want to book a visit for. Like, oh, I just got targeted by Instagram for this GLP-1 supplement. What do you think? It's like there are so many questions that pop into our head, especially around wellness. And we tend to use ChatGPT, or we tend to ask a friend, or we tend to ask that influencer who just posted about it who has no idea what they're talking about, instead of being able to ask our trusted wellness advisor who, again, knows our health history, knows where our levels are, and is able to then personalize whether or not you should try something.
Well,
And so yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say that's really important because as much as I love the wellness industry, there is a lot of misinformation. Not only is there a lot of misinformation, but even if it's not misinformation, sometimes you don't have the whole picture of the story. And this is where you and I both have a similar story. It's like with all the information that we had, even from experts, it's just that there were pieces of the puzzle that were incomplete and we didn't have a whole picture, but we were starting somewhere and, potentially thought we were doing better, but, you can hurt yourself. Like, for example, fasting. Fasting is something that I am a fan of, but for women, there are a lot of ways to do this wrong. So many more ways to do it wrong than there are for men. I believe there are certain times in the cycle that you shouldn't even think about fasting, right? This is when these hormones that are present don't like extra stress. And even if you love the idea of fasting, you are still working against your biology in that moment in time. So yes,
100%.
fasting can be good, but is it good for you? And is it good for you at all times? And how do you start doing it? And how do you make sure that you're getting enough protein even while you're doing it? What can you do? Maybe bone broth is something that you still incorporate while you're fasting. And, there's just so much more to it than just saying like, look on Instagram, so-and-so's fasting and they lost, 50 pounds, 20 pounds, and they look great. And they say they feel great. And it's like, that's fine, but that's not you. And you still need to have like a comprehensive, customized approach. And I find a lot of value in what you're saying right here with this, just being able to check and kind of say, hey, there are medical professionals. There's this team of medical professionals that I can like reach out to and who's going to have a better understanding and a better baseline potentially than I do, most likely, and be able to read the studies. I still struggle with reading and digesting studies. It's just like it's not really for the lay person. I
Definitely
didn't
not.
go to school and to be able to understand these studies, so I have to mostly rely on trusted sources to tell me about these studies, and whether they're good and they're not. But you hear there's like a study for everything, right? I mean, you could
Yeah.
find a study to support almost anything that you want online. So I think,
That is, by the way, where ChatGPT can be really helpful is like putting a study into it and asking it to summarize it in patient's terms, but also recognizing like what are the faults of this study? Like where should I be wary? Is it a big enough study? Does it include women of my demographic? Those types of questions that I think we often just take a study and say, oh, like, great, let me follow everything that it says. And it's not always that straightforward.
yeah. So I love the fact that you can reach out and have like everything from like a small, simple question in an app to these meetings with healthcare professionals that are, it just seems more comprehensive. But how long is like a introductory appointment? Because I think when you go and see a primary care physician for something, it's usually like you might get 15 minutes if you're really, really lucky. You might get 15 minutes with the doctor, and usually it's less, to be honest. And don't even get me started on the blood work stuff, because we all like, well, maybe we don't all know, but you should know that a lot of times the blood work that they're looking at sometimes is narrow in its scope, but even if it's comprehensive, let's say that you have an awesome primary care physician and he's going to take his full 15 minutes and he's going to give you as much as he can. The problem with those is that a lot of times they're still like looking at you based on the average. And when the average is failing in health overall, it doesn't always paint a picture for optimal,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So basically, the labs, the way they interpret the labs is they have these reference ranges that are determined based on where 90% of the US population falls. So they basically say that normal is defined by where 90% of the US population falls. And so obviously when we look at the US population, 90% of people, majority of those people have a chronic condition. So more than
Yeah.
50% of people have at least one chronic condition. So by definition, that means that that population that we're being compared to is like a terrible baseline because none of us want to be unhealthy. The goal when it comes to what's normal is a picture of health.
Right.
So that's when it really helps to go to a functional medicine doctor because the reference ranges that they look at are determined based on what's considered optimal. And that's also part of the reason why when I went to an IVF doctor and he told me that my levels were normal, he actually was completely wrong. My levels were suboptimal. Um, and that was leading to my miscarriages.
Oh my gosh. That's got to be so like frustrating to learn,
Yeah, it
you
is. But
know?
at the same time, again, going back to like our earlier point, like we almost can't fault the doctor. And,
No.
we have to think about, and I think fertility wellness is one of those things that is so misunderstood because it's even different than like normal women's wellness. Like when you're not trying to conceive, what should you be doing versus when you are trying to conceive, what should your macronutrient profile look like? What should your, exercise look like? And so, one of the things that we actually did as part of the Lanby is we did just a virtual wellness program. So for people who aren't members, but still want to be able to understand what fertility wellness looks like, we have a wellness program that helps guide you through all the things that you should be doing. And again, going even through the labs and saying, like, how do you interpret your own labs to make sure that you know that your levels are optimal?
This is so cool. I'm gonna sign up for this. Like, this is so cool. Honestly, I'm really excited to hear that there's something like this. This is like the missing piece. I've been like waiting for something like this. So this is incredible. Um, okay, what is a preliminary visit? How is it different than
Yeah.
what you would typically experience? And then what are we talking about price point wise? So I have opted, it's a two-part question, I guess, out of, as I mentioned, paying
Insurance.
insurance every month. I don't do it because I bank on my health. I prioritize my health. And I think that money that I save every month would be better invested in something where I can have more say in who I go and speak to. And it's not dictated by the insurance, which most of it, I don't like who they would send me to. I don't like being dismissed. I don't like being told, like, if I know that something's not right, I'm going to go to the doctor and I expect like an answer. I expect you to help me figure it out. I
Yeah.
don't want to be told that I'm okay. I don't want to be told that it's menopause either. I hate that a lot of women are dismissed in that. Oh, it's just, it's just female problems and there's nothing wrong. I see that happen all too often and it's just frustrating.
So
Um,
frustrating.
yeah, so I guess a bit of a two-part question there.
Yeah. So our baseline assessment is an 80-minute visit. So a big part of the experience is not having any wait times. You talked about most doctors only see you for a maximum of 15 minutes. What you didn't mention is that that's after about 30 to 45 minutes of waiting in the waiting room.
Hmm.
So we do not have a wait time. When you come to your visit, we see you right away. And then when you actually are in the exam room, we have sort of a stepwise approach. So it starts with a very long intake with the physician and the wellness advisor together. So the wellness advisor is the registered dietitian. We call them a wellness advisor because they talk to you about way more than just nutrition. And so in that intake, we'll talk about your medical history, your family history, any genetic information that you have, and then also your lifestyle. So what are you eating? How are you moving? How are you sleeping? What do your bowel movements look like? Are you, satisfied by your relationships? What does work look like for you? So really getting to know you at an intimate level. And then we go into the physical portion of the visit. So we'll do a physical exam. We do body composition analysis, which again, super important for women going through this, but also for men that are looking to increase their muscle mass and get rid of some of that fat around their waist, which happens to men too. And then we'll also do very extensive labs. So we test about 5 times the number of biomarkers than your typical primary care physician. And then after that, we'll take all that information and that's when we start to create your personalized care plan. And then in that care plan, there's going to be tailored recommendations for diet, for exercise, for supplements, for specialist visits, for prescriptions, for preventive screenings, for literally whatever is going to allow you to make progress on your health. And everyone's care plan is going to look different because their labs are going to look different and their medical history and their family history is going to look different. So even if your labs look absolutely beautiful, we're going to look at your family history and say, oh, you have a history of heart disease in your family. Let's make sure to really focus on your cholesterol health. Even if your cholesterol health, it looks normal right now, how can we further build resilience? Or again, if you are someone who had a history of breast cancer, like how can we make sure that we are putting you on an anti-inflammatory diet, that we're minimizing exposure to sugar, and we're actually helping you balance your sugar. So maybe we try a continuous glucose monitor to really understand and personalize your nutrition further. So we sort of like figure out where we want to prioritize based on the information at hand. And also taking into account someone's life goals. Like if they are trying to conceive or they are, someone who travels a lot, like what are your life goals and how can we meet you where you're at? Some people don't want to do all the things. Actually, the majority of people don't want to do all the things when it comes to wellness. Some people hate meditating. So how do we, again, adjust what recommendations that we make based on what you like and what you don't like and where you're willing to move the needle? So that's the baseline. In terms of our cost, so we have different price points based on age. So the younger you are, the less money you make, and also the less complex your health normally is. And so we have a price point for people under 35, for 35 to 50, and then for 50 plus. So 50 plus, it's about 10,000. From 35 to 50, it's about 7,000, a little under 7,000. And then for under 35, it's under 5,000. So we sort of, work with you with where you're at. And then we again, like for a lot of people who don't have insurance, because it's a flat fee model, they get so much value out of their membership that they use insurance very little or they use out of pocket services very little. I would say the things that they use it for would be blood work, for any imaging that they might need, and then for specialist referrals if
So
they
you
need it.
said flat fee. Does that mean like for how long is that?
For 1 year.
For 1 year? Okay. I mean, if I do the math here, like I think about that, like what people pay per month for insurance, not
Oh, it's
it's
so
not
much
cheap.
less than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, insurance
What?
premiums are insane.
Yeah.
I,
And then
I
usually that
believe,
doesn't, yeah,
yeah,
that
no,
doesn't
I
even
believe that
cover all the cost of like
exactly.
going, like you go and it still only takes like a percentage sometimes of like what
Especially
you
when you
need.
want to be selective about which doctors you go to.
Hmm.
So if you
Yeah.
are someone who like wants to have a really good experience going to the doctor and not wait 45 minutes to be seen, then maybe you shouldn't be going to one of those in-network doctors. Maybe you should be going out of pocket. And so if you add it up and think about how much you actually go to the doctor, it's really like you could save a lot of money. With that said, I do think that insurance has a place. Like I think it's meant to be used for major medical. Like if you, God forbid, get hit by a car and you have to go into the hospital and get surgery, like you do not want to be paying like 250 grand. Like that is how much it will cost. And
Hmm.
at that point it becomes a huge cost. And so I think it's a matter of like figuring out the right plan that works for you and your health needs. I don't think everyone should minimize insurance. I think some people use it a lot if they're going through, something, acute. But anyway.
I know with the UFC we have accident insurance. Um,
Hmm.
and so we're covered if anything happens to us like accidentally. So the positive of that, which I'm curious if that is something that just normal people could get. Can you just get accident insurance? Because
The thing is though that doesn't cover like you randomly get diagnosed with cancer. Like
no, it doesn't. It
there's
doesn't
so
cover
much
illness.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much that you can do to prevent cancer, but at the same time, there's a lot that is out of our control.
Oh yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
you have to also factor that into the
Yeah,
equation.
absolutely. And I think everybody should have a right to, factor that in at their own,
Risk.
their own risk and comfortability.
Yeah, risk tolerance.
Absolutely. So interesting. I'm just so glad that we crossed paths, Chloe,
Me
honestly.
too. It's
I
unbelievable how aligned we are. I mean, I'm like everything that you were saying, I was like nodding my head.
yes. And your company's based out of Manhattan as well?
Yes, yes. So we're currently focused in Manhattan slash the tri-state area. So we have members all across, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We also are licensed in Pennsylvania, Florida, and California. So we do have members there as well, but they come to New York for their baseline and then they do the rest of their care virtually. Eventually, we hope to open more locations across the country, but because of, how invested we are in making sure that the experience and the quality is incredible, we're not trying to rush our growth. It's something that we've seen play out for the worse, and for the type of experience we want to create, and for the longevity of the business that we want to create. It's really important that we think through, the right way to grow and building sustainably.
What does Lanby mean? Does it have a specific meaning, stand for something?
So funny enough, we really thought about, when we wanted to find the name of the company, we didn't want it to sound like anything traditional, like no health, no medicine, no like wellnessy spa even. We wanted it to feel institutional. We wanted it to feel like a legacy brand, but at the same time layer in the feeling of hospitality. And I think that that's really what's missing in the healthcare experience is that feeling that you're being going to be
Hmm.
taken care of. And so we drew inspiration from some of our favorite hotels in New York. So there's the Bowery, there's the Whitby, there's the Crosby, and there was like a similar ring to it. So it's the, and then it ends in BY. So we ended up finding an old Belsac play where there was a hypochondriac patient named Lambert. And like maybe I totally have this wrong, but like this is sort of how it resonates in my head. And we said, okay, let's take Lambert and let's, sort of fit it into this sound. And it worked. It was like the Lanby. It's like great.
I love it.
Love it.
I love that so much. Where can people find you and Lanby? How do they stay connected with what you're doing?
So you can learn more about our services on our website, which is thelandbee.com. We also have a podcast where we interview specialists, and that's a great way if you're not ready to become a member or you're trying to understand our approach. It's a great way to just get good content. I am the host of that one, which is always fun. And our social media is also a great way to get content in our newsletter. We send out blog articles, all free stuff, guides, etc. So it's a great way to just stay informed on, all the things around longevity and functional medicine.
Awesome. Well, you heard it first here. Thank you so much, Chloe. You are amazing. Not only is your story inspirational, but I just love a woman on a mission, and you are the definition of that. You are changing the landscape of the way that we, treat our patients and people and the medical system. So I'm all for that, and I'm definitely here for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. This was so fun.
Thank you.